we're continuing some of the themes and reflections of this part of the course, focusing on what you might call the incarnational aspect of human love. The way that in human love, the body is not merely an empty vehicle, but rather the body itself seems to be the source of the meaning of love. In the movie Babette's Feast, what we see is a reflection on this that has a very strong religious backdrop. So we have the pious and very ascetic Protestant people in Norway, represented particularly by the two sisters who are named after two of the great founders of Lutheranism. And their life is disrupted, enriched by the intrusion, the gift into it of a woman from France who is very Catholic. So that the movie is in part a religious meditation on the specific strengths of a certain kind of rather austere, rather ascetical Protestantism, and a certain kind of much more sacramentally understood, much more incarnational, much more bodily experience of religion that's represented by Catholicism. Now, in the movie, this first comes out when the French opera star, looking to get away from it all, comes to this little town, hardly a town, barely a village, this little settlement. And he discovers there that one of the sisters has a beautiful, beautiful voice, and he offers to give her musical training, which the dour but very good man, who is her father, the minister, allows. But it turns out that that musical training is inseparable from a kind of sensuality. So that we hear this daughter learning a song, a duet, in which the punchline is, "I am afraid of my joy." It's a song about the experience of falling in love. And particularly, it's a song about the possibility of leaving behind the respectable person to whom you're committed and going off with a person who transports you with beauty and with sensuality. So the movie is trying to find a thoughtful space to consider both the very great strengths of the virtues that are made possible by the austerity, by the ascetical commitments of these two women following out a path that they've inherited from their father, but how that kind of virtue can survive or be enriched when it gives up something of its own interpretation as a kind of asceticism, as a rejection of the body and the bodily. Just to remind you what's happened here, the woman, the refugee from France, Babette, who's now lived with the sisters for a long time, found unexpectedly that she'd won the French lottery. And with the money, she has offered to put on the birthday dinner for the 100th birthday of the father of the minister of the two women. Of course, he's long ago passed away. And with some trepidation at what sensuality might be involved in a French dinner, the sisters have allowed her to give them this gift. And what we're seeing here is the beginning of the French dinner party.
God aften. Kom indenfor. I varmen.
Si vi er klar til at servere.
Ja.
Babette siger, vi er klar. Jamen så, lad os da gå til bords.
Ja.
Og husk, vi kan intet smage. Lad os bede med præstens egne ord.
Må mit brød i dag mit lægen nære. Må mit lægen sjælens tjener være. Må min sjæl gå fremad Gud til ære. Amen.
Du siger ikke noget om maden.
Ikke et ord.
Ligesom ved brylluppet i Kana, maden har ingen betydning.
Vi vil ikke skænke det en tanke.
Høgst besynderligt. Amontillado. Den bästa amontillado jag någonsin har smakat. Detta är otvivelaktigt äkta sköldpaddssoppa. Och vilken sköldpaddssoppa.
Nu, Erik. Champagne. Et glas til alle. Et pour le général, hver gang det er tomt.
Jeg vil. Det må være en slags limonade.
Den är god.
Jaha.
Værsgo.
Tak.
Det här är ju Blinis Demidov. Det här är bestämt Veuve Clicquot 1860.
Ja. Jeg tror bestemt, vi får sne hele dagen i morgen.
Jeg glemmer aldrig mit første møde med præsten. Og den prædiken, han holdt. Jeg var en dønig, en slagsbror. Jeg har bestræbt mig på at blive en god kristen.
Kan I huske, hvad han lærte os? Gør en lille, elske hver andre.
Ja.
Kära vänner, jag kan försäkra er att prästens prekussamling tillhör vår drottnings käraste läsning.
There are so many themes in this movie that are connected to things that we've already done. It's hard to decide what to focus on. One notices, for example, a variety of connections to Thomas Mann's novella, Death in Venice. The issue about the status of the artist, about whether the artist immersed in this sensual world will also be destroyed by it. Clearly, this movie takes up a different stance from the stance that Aschenbach takes up in Death in Venice. In the end, Aschenbach is destroyed. He has to give up the discipline that makes of him an artist in order to cast himself into that sea of sensuality that the Polish boy Tadzio shows him. Here, the artist, Babette, is shown to be somehow separate from those for whom she makes her art, her food. We see her in a particularly nice moment. We see her tasting the wine before she allows it to be served. But of course, she herself is not at the dinner. Her own relationship to the sensuality that she perfects and makes beautiful for the diners is yet different from the diners. The presence of one cultivated man, the general, who can really appreciate her artistic accomplishment, pleases her deeply, but yet it is not the condition of her artistry. What Babette does, she does for that community, and most particularly for the sisters. So the movie's reflection on its thoughtfulness about the way that the artist is related to sensual beauty, and the way that the consumers, if that's not too harsh a word, of art, the way the audience of art appreciates that sensuality. That reflection runs throughout the movie. It's also very important that the sisters are clearly much better educated and much more cultivated people than those they serve. For example, their French is very, very good. The sister who could have been an opera singer, the sister who could have been the wife of a general. These are women who have had to give up something artistic in their own temperament, their own gifts, in order to live a certain kind of life of service. They can, to some extent, appreciate Babette. But they could not themselves go away and live in Paris without giving up what they've accomplished where they are. So Babette's feast is thoughtful about some of the same themes that Thomas Mann was thoughtful about. The place of art and artistry, the way that sensuality plays itself out, both in the way we love, but more generally in the way we live, and how a certain kind of demand for discipline might look like it has to reject sensuality altogether in order to accomplish itself, to preserve itself.
Erik, i de store glas. Nå, sæt de.
Den er god.
Den er god.
Kan I huske dengang, da præsten havde, ja, det var jo altså nærmest et mirakel, havde lovet at holde juleprædikenen i landsbyen på den anden side af fjorden? I 14 dage havde vejret været så hårdt, og ingen skipper eller fisker turde krydse fjorden. Folkene i landsbyen, de var ved at opgive håbet, men præsten han lovede dem, at kunne han ikke få en båd til at bringe sig over, så ville han komme gående på bølgerne. Og se, 3 dage før jul, så lagde stormen sig. Og det satte ind med så streng en frost, at fjorden frøs til fra bred til bred. Og dette var aldrig sket i mands minde.
I Paris vann jag en gång en ridekonkurrens och blev därefter firad av de franska kavalleriofficerarna med en middag på en av stans mondänaste restauranger, Café Anglais, där kökschefen förbluffande nog var en kvinna. Vi fick Kai en sarkophage, en rätt som hon själv komponerat. General Gallifet, som var värd för kvällen, förklarade att denna kvinna, denna kökschef, var kapabel att förvandla en måltid till en slags kärleksaffär. Ett älskogsförhåll där man inte längre kunde skilja mellan fysisk och andlig aptit. General Gallifet berättade att han förr utkämpat dueller för en vacker kvinnas skull. Men att det nu inte längre fanns någon kvinna i Paris för vilken han ville utgjuta sitt blod, utom för denna kökschef. Och var känd som tidens största kulinariska geni. Det vi nu äter är just Kai en sarkophage.
Halleluja.
Men det är verkligen Kai en sarkophage.
Ja, det är det.
At the dinner, the general tells a story about how when he was still a young man and he was taken to this famous restaurant in France. It turns out it was Babette's restaurant. that his general then gave a toast and talked about how the chef had the ability to transform a dinner into a kind of love affair that made no distinction between bodily appetite and spiritual appetite. The people who've come to this dinner have made a pact to say nothing at all about the food or drink. The sisters are very abashed that they've exposed their Protestant flock to the sensuous decadence of this French Catholic. What a terrible thing. But it's too late. We can't tell her to send the food back. They say, don't worry. We won't even notice what it tastes like. Their own sense of spiritual discipline requires them to hold off the sensual delights that, for Babette, are the vehicle of her artistry. Can it be that they could live making no distinction between bodily appetite and spiritual appetite? After the general has told this story about how the experience of the artistry of Babette's food can be like the experience of a love affair, in which the sensual enjoyment of a lover is not separable from the spiritual union with a lover. One of the women at the table responds to him by saying, "Man shall not merely refrain from, but also reject any thought of food and drink. Only then can he eat and drink in the proper spirit," as if the cost of the spirit is the body. As if the only reason we would caress our spouses would be to count their bones. And so the movie confronts us with the way the experience of the sensuality of the food and drink is in fact what gives the possibility of reconciliation and joy to this little community that has become argumentative and tired of itself. So that as the diners keep protesting or keep deflecting themselves from the sensuousness, so that every time the general comments on the food or the drink, somebody comments on the weather. Food is like the weather. Every time this happens, their rejection that comes in speech is matched by a reception that comes physically through the food and the drink. The wonderful moment when the woman takes a drink of this famous champagne and turns to her husband and says, "It must be a kind of lemonade." There's no doubt the enjoyment is there, and the enjoyment of the good meal is a part of the conversation of reconciliation and celebration. It's not a surprise that many of our best conversations come over our best meals. The bodily appetite and the spiritual appetite are not two things, but two aspects of one thing. From a directly religious point of view, one of the most striking things in this movie, and it comes right after the scene I've just described, after the general talks about the integration of bodily and spiritual appetite. And he's told that the right way to eat is without even knowing that there's food and drink there. The austere and ascetical minister's words are recalled when he said, "The only things we can take with us from this earthly life are those we have given away." And for him and for his daughters and his flock, they've given away their bodies. They've given away sensuality. One's tempted to think that they've forgotten some famous words that come in the creeds that all Christians share. The words that in the Nicene Creed that Catholics say at Mass refer to the resurrection of the dead, or that in the more basic form of the Apostles' Creed refer to the resurrection of the body. The Christian vision of paradise is of a bodily paradise, an incarnate paradise, not a paradise of souls, but a paradise of those ensouled. And so, at the end of the movie, the singing sister says to Babette the same thing that the opera star had said to her. "This is not the end, Babette. I'm certain it is not. In paradise, you will be the great artist that God meant you to be, and how you will delight the angels." Is this a movie about marriage? It's as much of a movie about marriage as the stories in André Dubus are stories about sacraments. It's an attempt to be thoughtful about what it's like to live in a body, to have your love be something that is as much a bodily appetite as it is a spiritual appetite. The movie is so good because it loves everybody in the movie. It loves the austere and the ascetical as much as it loves the sensuous. But it holds out the invitation that in the end, the dichotomy between the ascetical and the holy and the sensuous and the sacramental can be overcome. In that particular sense, this is an unusually Catholic movie because it's an unusually sacramental movie. As you roll this movie back through your mind, I encourage you to think about the way it's connected to other things that we've read, that we've thought about. Not only Thomas Mann's Death in Venice, not only André Dubus, but also many of the other works we've seen that raise for us a challenge about how the experience of beauty can be both a distraction from, but also the provocation to, an experience of something sacred or something divine. Our next movie will be Sunday, the movie Proof. See you then.